Hey, David Scott Lynn is here, and he helps therapists use mindful medical massage and yoga therapy to resolve complex chronic issues of their clients' neuromusculofacial systems, with also focus on emotional and augmented intelligence issues. So we're going to find out about David, what he does, how it stands out, and most importantly, how some of us entrepreneurs can get better tapped into this emotional intelligence concept, get our mind and body right. It's so important, right? You only get one mind and body. You can always create more money and create another business, but hey, what you have physically, you need to take care of it. A lot of people don't, so we need to get educated about it. So, Mr. David Scott Lynn, great seeing you after so many years. How you been?
Well, very good, Robert. Thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Well, heck yeah. Well, we're here doing the important stuff, right? Getting the word out and talking about what's important. And so if someone says, all right, Mr. David Scott Lynn, what do you do? I know you have all of these amazing stuff like the Myo-Structural Bodywork, the yoga therapy, but how would you package it up? How do you explain quickly about the change, the difference you create?
Well, basically, my main focus for 45 some years in the treatment room, one on one with people, has been getting people out of pain, uh, getting their restored functions. And we're talking about people who were scheduled for like a hip surgery and would rather not have the hip surgery. I have a good track record of keeping people from going into surgery or getting off drugs or whatever, because most people, including physicians, have very little idea how many problems in the body are created strictly by excess muscle tension.
Mm.
And if you can get that excess muscle tension to relax, I call it deep radical relaxation. Radical meaning get to the root of what's causing your tension and get that to release. It's amazing how many symptoms and conditions of the human body and some mind stuff too will just go away if you get the body more relaxed, more aware of what's going on in the present moment. And the nervous system is designed in such a way that when you become aware of things, the changes in some way spontaneously happen without you having to like make it happen with your willpower. So while I work on muscles and fascia, my focus is not treating the muscle to get rid of pain. My focus is on using the muscles and fascia in my manual contact or a yoga stretch in order to get the person in touch with their nervous system, the feelings and their muscles and so forth. And as they get that more in the moment present awareness instead of thinking about it, things just start to change. They relax, they let go, and a lot of symptoms, tension and stress just goes away.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like an amazing approach because you hear about, well, there's, if you have some kind of ailments, there's pills, there's surgery, but it always sounds really scary, right? There's, and it's a matter of, it's your only choice. It saves your life. Of course, go for that. But if it's going to add to the problem or it'll fix it temporarily and then you have worse problems later, that sounds terrible, right? And you hear about a lot of people end up with like back pain and they say, well, you could get all this metal hardware put in, and it's like, boy, that just sounds like you're making the situation worse. And it would be great if there were ways to, to fix it in a less crazy, intrusive way. And so it seems like yoga, especially the past maybe like 5 years, I've heard so much more about it. Like even my 5-year-old son at school, they do yoga. Like amazing, what a time to be alive. But me as an adult who grew up in like the 1990s, I'm kind of stubborn in my thinking. Whenever I hear yoga, I think it sounds really girly and at the same time really scary and intimidating. And I can't be the only one. So like, what would you say to someone who like says, I hear all these great things about yoga, but I'm afraid to even look into it because I don't even know where to begin or like what it's involved.
Well, what's interesting is to contradict all the mythologies, the physical yoga postures, all the stretches and the movements, that people do, they actually did not originate 5,000 years ago with mystical yogis. They originated in the gymnasium of Europe, and in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Indian military, with the help of the Young Men's Christian Association in America, imported the physical exercises from the gymnasiums of Europe to India in order to strengthen up the physical health and strength of Indian men. And the Indian military was using yoga as part of that, because if you get into it, it can be very strenuous. You can do power yoga to strengthen, or you can do what I call let go yoga. I focus more on people who need to release and relax, because I work with injured people. People who want to get strong, though, yoga is an incredible strengthener, and it was the military that first started using it in India, and then the gurus adapted it, and then they added all this mystical stuff into it, which has made it started sounding girly. So there's it's very different than most Americans realize. And what really yoga is just paying attention in the moment to what's going on. That's even if you're watching TV, paying attention to yourself and your TV as you're watching TV gives you a different experience. Might make you stop watching TV, because you realize, this is kind of a distraction from my real life. But the point is, it's attention to what is in the moment, and that is all of that. All things that are attentive come in through the physical body, through the physical senses, your eyes, your ears, your sense of touch. So even in emotional intelligence, they write all these articles, but most of them talk about it from the point of view of how can you use your mind to fix your emotions, but your emotions all start in the physical body. So that's why yoga and hands-on body work, massage, tai chi, by focusing in the body, that actually does more for expanding your emotional intelligence than trying to fix it with your willpower. Not that you shouldn't do the willpower-oriented exercise, that's all fine, but the root of it is in the physical body.
Yeah. And so it's all connected, it seems like, and it's worth pursuing these other avenues. And you hear a lot of good things about the mindfulness and being in the present and just in general, like being aware, right? Don't just drift through life on autopilot. Don't just accept that you are miserable. And so when someone comes to you, like, would you say, is there like a pie chart or like a certain percentages, or like what problems do people usually have when they approach you?
Well, that's kind of all over the map, but it tends to be, historically in my work, it's tended to be people who were in physical pain, had multiple car accidents, fell downstairs, all that kind of stuff. Most of them, a large portion of them in pain for 10, 20, 30 years and have been trying everything, trying to get better. And I have a very high track record of not just getting them feeling better, but out of pain. That tends to be the majority of it. And what I'm trying to do now is move more towards people who are interested more in the mind-body connection. Those people come to me because of their physical body hurts. But now I'm trying to get into the whole thing about enhancing emotional intelligence, because we need to get the three characteristics of being human that AI doesn't have, so we can compete with AI. Stuff like that. But most of the people that I've worked with in the past were people who were scheduled for a surgery or been in pain for 20 years or whatever. But they almost all of them say, wow, I remember one guy when I first started, I was working on his physical body for things. And then one day I was doing house calls in those days, a long time ago. And so I showed up at his house one morning and he said, David, I lost my job this week. He says, the only thing I can blame it on is you. I said, well, how did I help cause you to lose your job? He said, well, I've been feeling more upright and more open, and I've been feeling more real. And I started talking back to my boss because he has started voicing his opinions. He had an emotional opening, that let him express himself more authentically. Now, he ended up getting a much better job and all that, but it actually was a positive thing for him. And so that's what always kept me in the back. And stuff like that happens on the side. 10, 20% of people have those kinds of oh my God, I talk to my wife differently, or my husband, things like that.
Yeah, well, put in different inputs, you get different outputs, right? It's like in Seinfeld, George Costanza said, I'll start doing the opposite of everything that I want to do. And then his life drastically improved, right? And you think about if you mix things up in your life. And so you say people come to you and sometimes they have this physical pain and you say it's all connected. You kind of get tapped into your emotional intelligence. And so how does someone get there? Because I imagine that many times someone might have been trapped in the same patterns for decades. So how does someone say, well, how do I begin to control my emotions, or how do I use my mind to change my physical pain? How's it done?
Well, the first thing is one of the values of getting body work or doing yoga. Doing yoga is free, by the way, and you can do it by yourself anytime, any place. You don't need a therapist, and you can do self-treatment. You can self-massage yourself. But basically, the first step is getting your mind more connected to your physiology. Because we are in such an abstract society now, everything. We don't have a lot of farmers, a lot of construction workers or small. Everybody's dealing with their computer, they're dealing with the numbers, so they're kind of abstract. So they've lost touch with their physical body. So one of the things doing these exercises or techniques, that starts the process of just drawing your mind down into the body rather than trying to force your mind to think about your body. And that's a very, very different approach, because I've got an article I'm writing called Thinking Thoughts About Not Thinking. Meditation is supposedly slowing down or stopping your thinking. Well, you can't stop your thinking by thinking. What
Right.
you have to do is you have to get your attention distracted, or actually attracted, to what's really going on, and your body is always in the physical moment. It's always present. So if you can start feeling what's going in your body instead of thinking about it, you just naturally start to become more internally aware. And then there are things built into the nervous system that just start making the changes that we're looking for. It's just right in there with the immune system and everything. There's metabolic immunity, and there's even muscular immunity, where your body will tend to relax if it's given the opportunity. And then when people start getting more interested in the structure of their mind and their thinking, how it works, they start paying more attention to their thinking. And the more you pay attention to your thinking, then you're paying attention in the moment, and so the thinking starts slowing down all by itself. That's the trick to
Very
meditation
nice.
that I learned from some important people in my life, and that you don't try to stop your thinking. You pay attention to your thinking, because you're paying attention to your thoughts in the moment, and being in the moment is what meditation is, and mindfulness.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. It does, and it seems like the way that you explain it is it's not a fast, instant process, is it? I imagine that it takes a lot of practice, and like you're giving me flashbacks to like just learning different techniques, right? When they say things like, well, look at 5 things you can see and 4 things you can hear and 3 things you can smell, and like that method of like distracting your brain. And then I think just by that, like that's almost like magic. I'm like that calms me down. And then like the body scan where like all the meditation audio, they say, relax the top of your head, relax your ears, relax your jaw muscles, relax your teeth, your tongue. And I'm just thinking like how, like by breaking it down, it's pointing out parts of me that I didn't realize were tense. And then I just go step by step, and I realize like it takes some patience, right? It does seem tedious at first, but then you imagine that as it becomes more of a habit, then you can do it with less deliberate effort. And then you can like, continue to push forward and work on some of these more advanced goals and milestones and really slow down your thinking. And so like, what do you think stops people from doing this? You say that you provide yoga coaching or others can do yoga coaching, but all the information's out there, right? You say we're in front of computers, we got this information age, we got podcasts like this one, we can learn all this stuff, but why are so many people still stressed, still unhappy? Why don't they take action on
Well, I
this?
could tell you one story from when I first started teaching yoga. One of my best friend at the time, he said, David, I'd really love to come to your yoga classes, but I like to go out drinking with my buddies on Friday and Saturday nights, and I'm afraid that if I start doing yoga, I won't want to drink anymore, and then I won't have fun with my buddies on the weekends. Other people,
Hmm.
it's just, I don't have the time, because they think they got to do 20 or 30 minutes of a meditation or a yoga stretch, and I have a solution to that. But it's all over there. Every excuse you can imagine has been used. even completely crazy stuff. And then what you said, there's a lot of men who think it's, and the way it's taught, if all you've seen is women in a yoga class doing yoga to Madonna songs, then it's going to look girly. That's the gym class yoga. And whereas historically yoga was always one-on-one. The group thing was more of an American thing, and then the Indians adapted it. But anyway, every excuse you can imagine has been used, even crazy stuff like, I'm afraid I won't be able to go out drinking with my buddies, and which taught me something, though, because it made me realize what I was up against, because I started teaching yoga in 1976. And
Wow.
talk about, limits on who would be interested in it. It was pretty intense. And although I started in Zen meditation when I was 13 in martial arts, so I had some preliminary stuff going on. So I started using that Zen meditation through my teens. I was an iron worker. I raced motocross. I crashed my motorcycle a lot. Entertained the audiences quite a bit. But so I was applying it, and then I started doing yoga when I was 19, and lots of aches and pains started going away, and that's what got me into it. And so for me, it was kind of the Zen meditation thing was kind of by accident, because I was in martial arts mainly because I wanted to learn how to fight, and I just stumbled. Nobody taught me meditation. I just accidentally discovered about this, had the experience, and then a few months later, my mom bought me this book on karate, and there's a chapter on meditation. I go, oh my God, that's what happened to me that night when I started zoning in, because meditation is really just kind of being in the zone, things like that. So I was kind of predisposed to it sort of by accident. I didn't have the intention really to get into it. But other people, they just have to decide. Now, what I tell people is that if you can't fit your life into yoga classes, just like, for example, whenever you're walking, just start letting your joints go. Whenever you're typing, whenever you stop typing, just relax your joints for a moment. Do micro doses, homeopathic doses of yoga, doing these little tiny micro movements. And you ask the question, when does the heart relax? And people think about that for a while. Where the heart relaxes in between each beat. It doesn't take a 20-minute break, to stop pumping blood to relax. So what I tell people is, ideally, in between every movement you do, in between every contraction and letting go of that, take a brief fraction of a second to just quick breath, let go. And Bruce Lee always talked about. He said half of his strength and power was because of his ability to relax. So when someone like Bruce Lee tells you that, then you start to think, well, maybe this isn't just a girl thing.
Yeah, there is value in relaxing, right? You relax and it allows you to think better. Even like, when us having this conversation here, right? Like when I was younger, I used to think, well, I have to be 100%, I have to be like fully charged up, but there's still value in being relaxed and just having a nice conversation. And like I used to, when I would teach, I would rapid fire a big list of bullet points. And now thinking back, it's like, who even would have followed that versus just kind of being slow and deliberate and being a normal human being? What a concept. And so it seems like you're saying a lot of like people, make excuses. It's easy to make these objections. And you're saying, well, find the time, figure it out, solve the problem, and look into some of these techniques, right? There's yoga, there's Zen meditation, and there's so much that you've learned and you've taught, and it's being discovered all the time that's being used. But we're on a podcast here, so the point of a podcast is just to give us a little bit of a taste, a tease about what's possible. That way people say, oh my gosh, I need to check out more of what David Lynn has going on. So in these last few minutes of our conversation, what's the missing question? What should I be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
Well, can I take 20 seconds to give you a technique?
Oh, of course. Give me a technique.
Okay, so if you hold your arm, one of your arms, either one, out to the side, and then start, as on your breathing, on your inhales, move your elbow away from your torso, And then the exhale, just soften and relax. And just do that a few times. And each inhale, move your elbow away from your torso. And what muscles are relaxing and lengthening to allow that are the muscles of your shoulder girdle. Do that for, half a dozen breaths, and then put your arm down and ask yourself, I think I'd like to feel that on my other side. And maybe you'll go and do that. But it's that simple that any joint in your body, people who have jaw joint problems, if they just take a moment to let their jaw drop, and when they're walking down the street, instead of pulling your legs forward with the muscles on the front of your leg, relax the muscles on the back of your leg, and then the joint decompresses and the leg just flows forward. Little things like that you just integrate yoga principles into your life rather than trying to fit into some paradigm of what yoga is supposed to look like.
Yeah, and just mix it up, right? Do something different and see about your different results. And so if someone says, man, a lot of what David Scott Lynn here woke me up, blew my mind, a lot of it made sense, but I want to find out more from him about what he teaches and how that can benefit me, who would be reaching out to you and where would they go?
Well, the main people I'm working with right now is massage therapy and yoga therapists who want to learn my technique, which I developed back in the 80s. But, and I know from a marketing point of view, you're never supposed to say, this is good for everybody. You're supposed to have a sub niche, but, it applies to everything people do. There is nothing in your life that relaxation and meditation and letting go can't help. Whether you're an executive who wants to integrate real emotional intelligence instead of thinking about emotional intelligence, you're someone that, give me a call. We can talk about your situation, and I can give you some tips like move your elbow away from your shoulder a couple times a day. People who are therapists who want to learn the integration of yoga and body work into a holistic system with the Myo-Structural Balancing, which is all about this, how I analyze which muscle fibers to work on and in what sequence, because if you do the wrong sequence, sometimes the person gets worse. And, I wish I could answer your question more clearly. I struggle with that. Well, who's my target market? Well, for training, it's therapists who want to learn how to do my system of therapy. For emotional intelligence, it would be entrepreneurs and executives who read a few articles in Harvard Business Review or something, say, well, they're telling us that profitability increases when the people are more emotionally intelligent. That might be a motivator. I know that's a capitalist motivation, but I'm a free enterprise capitalist anyway, so we can have a nice conversation about what it takes to get more in touch with your reality. Because when you are more in touch with your reality, you can feel the reality of other people more directly, and because it's from the mirror neurons in the brain, actually perceive the other person in a way that your cerebral cortex doesn't. The thinking part of your mind kind of blocks what the mirror cells are trying to communicate. So those are my two big focuses right now: therapists who want to learn how to do my system, and executives and entrepreneurs who want to get more into the whole emotional and creative intelligence thing and be more prepared to deal with what I prefer to the term augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, because I want to work with AI to augment people's abilities, not replace them.
Right, not just use it as a crutch, but I mean, I love using AI as a tool in that way of being like, well, give me some new ideas. Or I was thinking about this approach to the writing, the communicating, this project, and it gives me something, and then I add to it. You're working with the machine, and so that's great. There's two buckets. You say there's therapists who want you to learn your system, and then there's what we're focused on here today is entrepreneurs who want to get dialed into this emotional intelligence. And you tapped into two, I think, helpful concepts for me today, Mr. David Scott Lynn. One is like that snowball effect where you just have a little snowball and you get a little bit of result from the yoga, do a little something with the elbow and the torso distance on the walk. You see a little bit of improvement. It makes you curious for more. And that's valuable. And then there's also that idea of it's so easy to make excuses because of your own low self-esteem. And you say, well, why should I get more fit? Why should I make more money? Why should I get a better handle on your emotions? And I think something that's really important for us adults is to say, well, it's not just about you. It's once you get your emotional intelligence better, then you can better serve others. So if you won't do it for yourself, at least do it for the greater good and for others. And so those are just some helpful ideas that just by speaking to you, just were great reminders for me. And so you say that there's the therapists and there's the entrepreneurs. And so if someone wants to look into some of this stuff, what's the website? What's the next step?
David Scott Lynn .com is my main website. It's in redevelopment right now because I've expanded my thinking. I was out of the picture for a number of years, taking care of my parents and COVID and all this stuff. So I am doing a lot of rewriting on it. But there's a lot of information there, and the contact information is there. And I'm willing to talk to anybody for 20 or 30 minutes. Just hey, how you doing? What you up to? Can I help you? So that's the main website. And I have a letgoyoga.com, but that's a little more in need of more reworking. And there's a lot of yoga stuff on the David Scott Lynn. If I could just real quick say, you're saying about people's resistance to taking action. In my 3 C's on my formula, 3C is cognitive, creative, conative intelligence. Conation is the art or science of what makes people actually take action. And what people start to discover in meditation and mindfulness is that thinking actually, while it might get them interested in taking an action, it also becomes the block to taking action. So the trick is if you can get more in touch with your psycho-emotional, physical processes and reduce the amount of thinking that's running the show all the time, like a freight train, what you want to do is keep the attention on things, and then thinking just reduces and everything takes care of itself and the action just happens.